2024 was kind of not a great year for me on a personal level, but as a consumer, I ate incredibly well. And I don't just mean because I found all the best restaurants in my area that I'm married to a good cook. I'm talking about I'm culturally spoiled. Most of this was on the music and YouTube front. A lot of it is because of the Kendrick and Drake beef, the hip-hop civil war. I think it's been since Marvel's Civil War that there was a cultural moment that actually popped this hard where like people had so much to say about something going on. And this one was even better because the consequences were real. It was closer to actual war, thankfully without guns being fired, but with a lot more money riding on the line than even what funds small nations. I'm going to do a top 50 songs of the year list after this video, but I wanted to tackle YouTube first because as great as the songs themselves were, like in Kendrick and Drake's beef, what made it so exciting was how many people were talking about it, how much depth people were going into with pouring over it, and how much I learned, how much I wouldn't have figured out by myself. How much it felt like there was this massive coming together to try to analyze something. And like, this is basically my dream. I mean, I got into analysis through lyrical analysis, through trying to break down the Mars Volta songs on the internet and finding it really gratifying when I actually did do that, you know, when I was able to understand meanings behind lyrics. So that kind of sits at a core of how this whole thing that I've been pushing for 15 years of doing analysis videos, specifically analysis, not reviews, analysis videos, that is now mainstream, particularly in the music world, which is where I've wanted it. Like, I've done music analysis for years and none of it ever took off. None of it ever hit. I've broken down rap songs. I've broken down rock songs. I've done tons of attempts at something like what has now become popular to do for every new song that is either from or about Kendrick Lamar. But I just did not expect that that dam would finally break in 2024 as just a result of Kendrick like very publicly calling Drake a pedophile, which was the funniest fucking shit imaginable. So satisfying after like 12 years of buildup to this happening. I had my own video about that called The End of Millennial Culture. I will talk about a couple of my own videos. There's gonna be so many YouTube videos listed in this video. I watched a preposterous amount of YouTube. Some of these are channels that I only saw a few of their videos, you know, like I started following them based on something that I really liked, and I didn't necessarily go back and see everything they've ever done. Some of these are people I've seen everything they've done. Some of them I've been following for years and years. Some of them I just discovered this year, even though they have already been hugely popular for years and years. Some of the people in my top list are brand spanking new and you've probably never heard of them at all. But I'm only going to really talk about 25 of the videos I watched this year because otherwise this would just be overwhelming. It would be too long. I would never get it done. There's just so fucking much. So we're going to start with a lengthy honorable mentions segment, but I'm going to break the honorable mentions down into categories. The proper top 25 list will not be categorically based. It's just going to be these are the 25 best videos in the order of how good they are, like a proper list. But I want to mention all these other channels who made great videos this year. I will probably talk a little bit about some of the channels themselves rather than the videos, just when I really feel like a channel, even if they didn't break the top 25, consistently put out great content all year. I want to give them a mention. But otherwise, I'm really going to be speed running these honorable mentions. And if there's something that you're like, wait a minute, how could you possibly not have mentioned that video? Either that means it's in the top 25 or I simply didn't see it. However much YouTube I watched, obviously I didn't have time to see everything. The fact that I even have seen this much is a little nuts, and I'm sure nobody's going to be able to see everything I recommend in this, but hopefully you will get at least some strong recommendations from this video. So we'll start with music culture, especially since I already jumped into talking about Kendrick and Drake. There is a video in my top 25 that I'm sure you will predict being there that is about the beef. There's only one I'm allowing into the top 25, but there were lots of channels I started following because of their coverage of the beef. Spree I followed because of the video Kendrick Lamar's Pop Out, The Red Wedding, an analysis of the big concert. Urban legend Will Evans, who basically covers like any sort of gossip news as soon as it breaks. Had a video called J. Cole warned to bow out, Kendrick Lamar versus Drake beef by Schoolboy Q. We still don't know if that's necessarily true, but again, it's an urban legend. Thought Crimes, they had a video called J. Cole, the fall off is about Drake and First Person Sniper. Thought Crimes is really good at theory crafting. This is a channel that if you want to hear sort of conspiratorial talk and really lengthy live streams that usually break news and sort of start theory crafting before anybody else does and are usually correct, it's a good channel to watch for that. Clarissa C. had a video called The Lost Art of Alter Egos, Drake, the greatest character ever played. That was a very strong analysis of Drake. Daniel Alexander's video, The DNA Dilemma, the secret message Kendrick Lamar hid in Damn, about one of the older Kendrick albums, reassessing it now that we know where we've gotten to. Moxie approved Kendrick Lamar's femininity balance and the hip-hop industry. I actually was in one of Moxie's live streams to argue about transgender bathroom rights, and we had a really interesting conversation. Unfortunately, I think that live stream went down because of copyright reasons from some of the clips that were played, but I like this channel. Chilling with Moni had a video, Academics is trying to start a war between Los Angeles and Toronto and this won't end well. I like the way that Moni sort of aggressively goes after people's toxicity. You know, there's a lot of people who kind of try to skate around really accusing someone or calling them out for the way that they're behaving, and she really was like, no, Academics, you are a bad person and you're doing bad things. She does pretty solid hip-hop coverage. Lil Bill's video, The Last Culture War, which was about Prince versus Michael Jackson conflict, which was, you know, the last time there were two huge artists at the top of their genre going, you know, against each other and really fucking with each other's money on this level. Rap Latte is a newer channel that emerged sort of towards the end of the year. Really compelling content. It's hard for me to pick out like a favorite video from them because they're discussion driven and they're just full of really good quotes. But Doechii Live is Like Hip Hop on Broadway is a video that I did end up quoting in my own video, Doechii, the most inspiring artist of 2024, which is the video I probably put the most effort into this year and had the most fun making, so I really hope people check that video out. Read My Soul had a video about my favorite hip-hop content creator, ex-journalist, which is about the company man who is also my favorite hip-hop content creator and journalist, and I will talk about the company man in the top 25, unsurprisingly. But this was basically just giving flowers to the company man in a way that I really appreciated seeing someone do. I have also been following him for more than a decade, and I've kind of always considered him like the best journalist on YouTube, so it's nice to see that he has really kind of popped off this year and started getting that recognition in a public way. Pearl Fountain had a video called Hidden Meanings Behind Eminem's Houdini music video explained that I remember enjoying. Luesta makes lots of really entertaining videos sort of wrapping up the problems that rappers are having in their careers, or some of the successes. Rappers Who Proved Interviewers Wrong was a great video. Times where actually reviewers thought rappers were going to fuck everything up, but they pulled through. Flowers is a channel that is basically dedicated to giving flowers to certain artists, although like Luista, also there are sometimes more like pack outs of people who have really fucked up, like how to overreact and destroy everything you've built. I think this was about Lil Yachty. Open Mike Eagle is a legendary underground rapper who I've been a fan of at least since the Dark Comedy album and the Hellfire Club days. He's really pushing for this year is the year that we all start talking about how we like our own music, and I also really appreciate just seeing another person who is a creator stepping into the criticism space and not like being worried about, I don't know, associations or implications about how people feel when an artist talks about other people's art. I think his perspective is super valuable in this field. There was a video called Pootify Sucks, but don't let anybody tell you how to market yourself. OME's message in general is kind of like, hey, when we say like be yourself if you want to be an independent artist, like people are going to tell you that and still like attack the foundations of how you be yourself constantly, and you just got to constantly ignore that and keep on doing you, you know, and having your wisdom and expressing your wisdom, and I think Open Mic does a great job of that. The Genius channel always pulls great artist interviews explaining their lyrics. Again, having artists literally do their own analysis. I enjoyed Denzel Curry's Black Flag freestyle, Lyrics and Meaning, because that was a song I didn't even really like that much, but I liked hearing him talk about it, and Denzel Curry's energy is always just explosive. Goon Squad TV is a really fun channel that talks about alternative rock, a lot of which is forgotten, or like bad albums by really famous bands and stuff like that. There was a video called Dumb Music Merch, just going over really silly stuff that bands released. If you listen to like alternative rock radio growing up, this will almost certainly give you some fun nostalgia to make fun of. That Dope Shit is a channel mostly dedicated to like artist short documentaries, usually talking about like a period in their career. I really liked the Ghostface Killah writing an album with schizophrenia video that goes into like Ghostface having really seriously like bad schizophrenic episodes during the creation of like one of the greatest albums he's ever been involved with. I appreciated that a lot as somebody with dissociative issues who, you know, has to use creativity a lot of the time to help me deal with that. So that was a great video. Mad Sci Rexify is a really fun channel. I love the way that the videos are written. I love the tone of them. There's this sort of optimism towards the corny side of music and the way that musicians present themselves. This video, Rebecca Black, Reclamation and Resilience, is about Rebecca Black basically being known for like the worst song of all time, but managing to spin that into something sincerely admirable on some level as a career. Turismo has always done awesome long-form hip-hop documentaries about underground hip-hop, particularly internet stuff. The Birth of Internet Rap, Above the Clouds, Episode 1 was really great and in-depth. Red Letter Media is mostly a film analysis and review channel that I greatly enjoy. Everybody's heard of them. I just want to spotlight this obscure video they did called Marilyn Manson or Bloodhound Gang Trivia Part 2. It was literally just Mike Stacklasa reading lyrics to Jay and Rich and seeing if they could guess if it's a Marilyn Manson or Bloodhound Gang lyric, and it's surprisingly difficult, and a lot of their lyrics are just hilarious for both of them. Ben McKenty's channel died this year, so it's appropriate to recommend the video Black Metal is Fucking Dead, because I think Finn has a lot more in common with black metal than he wishes. And maybe realizing that is what made him have to kill his channel. Dev Limes is another musician who is really talented and underground and independent, and also does her own YouTube show. Instead of talking about other music, she recreates it. She will like do blind recreations of songs and stuff like that, and lots of like odd parodies of like a musician's life or social media presence, like kind of deconstructing the idea of something that would happen, such as the Dev Lemons tour disaster, which is like a fake, like a mockumentary of a tour disaster, essentially. It's interesting. And last on this list, HTML Jones, who has interviewed a lot of musicians, especially transgender musicians and other internet creators. Just very fun editing, great interviews. Asking Devi McCallion of Black Dresses and Girls Ritual invasive personal questions was a good one. I was interviewed by HTML Jones like a few months ago, but the video never came out. I don't know if she dumped it. It was not like a very fun interview because I was in kind of a depressive state of mind, but I don't know. I don't know if that's still happening. You'll have to ask her about it. All right, Cultural Philosophy is my next segment. The Storyteller is a channel that mostly is dedicated to extensively analyzing and historically chronicling the Boondocks, the comics, and the show, which I greatly appreciate because it's massively influential series on me growing up. But also there was this video called Sonic and Existentialism that I remember really enjoying. Manny Muscat's comedian friend of mine had a great stand-up set at the end of the year. Manny Muscat's wrapping up 2024. I recommend it. Jimmy G is a fun channel just covering really sort of random cultural ideas. The Insanely Dumb World of Marketing is a fun one from somebody on that course. Trixie Clipsy, my Clips channel. The best clip that they took is the one where I talk about why people don't want to learn media literacy. I think that one's probably going to be important to understanding my approach as I go forward in writing for people. Make Art Not Content is sort of a like push you to create type of a channel. 25 rules for artists if you just need something to watch to get your inspiration up. Snow had a video called The Infinite Weight of Mediocrity, which I enjoyed as somebody who has kind of realized, I'm just not qualified as a genius or anything like that, and the infinite weight of feeling that. Zoe B is a really solid writer, a YouTuber who talks about writing, and had a video about YouTube and the death of media literacy, where the conclusion is essentially that nobody has ever really understood or been able to define what media literacy is, so it's hard to understand if it is dead, but everybody seems to agree that that's the case. So I think this partly inspired my why people don't talk about media literacy rant. Veritas Joe has a video called When You're Too Pretty to Be Autistic. Just a solid message. The Musings of a Crouton is a channel that I find incredibly entertaining. This is another one where just the writing style is like a brain massage, like it's a type of therapy in and of itself. I think Looks Maxing is kind of good, actually. Might have been my favorite video this year. Lazy Pillow or Yotam Perel, a competing video about body image issues, The Swan and Hating Your Body. This is an interesting channel because sometimes it's independent animation and sometimes it's independent vlogs or short films or just like rambles. They're all solid though, very much recommended. Art Chad, The Fall of the Nice Guy Empire. I enjoyed this. Joseph Fisher, The Timothy Chalamet Effect. This is basically about how there's, always some kind of twink in culture that we sort of run into the ground. Shredded Nerd, The Most Annoying Guy Ever. This reminded me of like the old videos that used to complain about hipsters in the 2000s. Shoe on Head, America is in Shambles. I find her entertaining. I know a lot of people think she's like problematic or whatever. I don't give a shit. In the category of film and TV culture, I always recommend the Kino Corner, who had a great video about the history of the destruction of film. Evasive is super entertaining, making people like trans people watch Mrs. Doubtfire or other combinations of group with movie that group might find offensive. Hack the Movies, good friend of mine with a great show that goes in depth about all of the background of production of a film. Is It All Good? And Leprechaun Back to the Hood being the highlight talking about tapes episode of this year featuring Manny Muskets. Every Frame a Painting, the arguably greatest analysis film essay channel of all time, returned with the Sustained Two-Shot this year, the first of a limited series of return videos. Be Kind Rewind, Making a Mess, A History of Megalopolis was a really entertaining history into the long time it's taken for this film to get made. Alex Boucher live action remakes before Disney did them, another fun historical video. Life of Slice is one of the newer, younger channels that has intrigued me because they go back through the eras of my childhood, the 90s and 2000s, but as a younger person looking at it from like a culturally anthropological standpoint and kind of trying to understand the like aesthetics that were popular during certain periods. So for instance, the gritty realism style that defined post 9/11 movies. All of these videos are really interesting. Emp Lemon, one of my favorite video essay channels, had a video about the history of the most profitable film in history. Archer Green had a fun video about that time Tarantino tried to reinvent himself, basically a Jackie Brown analysis. Bago Bones did Kaijuology, the history of a genre, if you need to know the whole history of kaiju. Jacob Geller, I want to tell you about my favorite fight scene, just a solid scene analysis. Cinefix, IGN Movies and TV, is one of my favorite film coverage channels because they make the best lists. They make list videos where you actually believe that they have knowledge of every single film that could possibly be in that category. At the very least, they will sell you that whatever they picked belongs there. But this year, rather than having any really amazing, mind-blowing lists, they had this great video on Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, the bonkers sequel we almost got. The Beetlejuice 2 that would have been. Patrick H. Willems had a cool video about Jaws. What if the mechanical shark never broke down? What would the movie have been? And so many people have attributed the fact that it broke down to being like a positive thing, and he's kind of analyzing like, well, how much would it really have changed? Narrow is a great gaming channel, especially if you care about like mods and software and the ways to like make the gaming experience better. AI can ruin movies now too. Alien and True Lies on 4K is a great video about just how, well, you know, as the title says. Computer Lab Hijinks is one of the smaller, newer channels that I was really interested in this year. It's kind of gone through some format shifts between like a podcast or more of an essay analysis channel, but there was a great video revisiting Roger Ebert's Phantom Menace review. The conversation around this film has been really interesting to watch evolve and change as people are trying to figure out if Plinkett was too harsh on the movie or if the defenders of the movie are too in love with it. Like, is this a good movie or not? Everybody seems to have their own opinion. Yara Zaid has been one of my favorite channels for a while, although she didn't really cover anything I knew anything about this year, but her video We Have Get Out at Home was entertaining. I had seen a lot of like trailers for these shows and stuff that look like obvious ripoffs of Get Out, so I was glad somebody investigated all that. Lowercase Jai, How Kitchen Nightmares Manipulates You. This was a fun one for me, especially as somebody who's seen a ton of Kitchen Nightmares and does really enjoy the show. Steak Bentley, The End of the Venture Bros. Even though I haven't actually seen the ending of the Venture Bros, this reassured me that I do need to get around to that at some point. Your Movie Sucks. Didn't put out a whole lot of super big videos this year, but the YMS on Unfrosted was pretty satisfying because I overheard my parents watching that movie, and God, did it seem bad. ASE Presents continues to review a film every single day. Also, though, I really enjoyed her short where she recreated Cartman's cereal bombs from South Park: The End of Obesity. And as much as she's talked about Scooby-Doo, she's been covering like episode after episode. There was also a great video from this channel, Cartsy, about the history of Daphne, Scooby-Doo, and cultural movements. Who is Daphne Blake? This channel is like obsessed with Daphne in particular, and I'm fascinated by it. Moving into just miscellaneous culture, this is stuff that I only know a couple channels about. I'm not necessarily as deep into these cultures as some of the other ones I'm going to talk about, but I like these channels. And some of them also just talk about such broad topics that it's hard to really categorize them. So, you know, food, cars, books, cards, animals, fashion, comedy, fighting, radio, web, all covered here. Josh Wiseman has been my favorite YouTube cook for pretty much as long as he's been doing it. Lately, he's been traveling a lot to try to decide what is the best of each category of a type of thing. Which country has the best fried chicken was a particularly interesting video because there were so many different types of fried chicken. Joshua Citarella, I haven't actually seen any of this channel aside from this one interview with J-Reg on post-ironic hyper-political extremism. The podcast is called Doom Scroll, I guess, but it was a great interview, and I will be talking about J-Reg in the top 25. Regular Car Reviews is a consistently entertaining channel. I don't know shit about cars. I don't usually really know what they mean, what they're talking about, but the writing is really fun, and that's what keeps me coming back. I picked the 2004 Volvo V70 as awful as a video to recommend, but like you could really just watch any of them. Better Than Food book reviews I've been following forever. I don't read like at all, so I only really know about books through this channel talking about them, but 6 Mistakes Destroying Your Reading is a great helpful piece of advice to make reading better for you if you're trying to do that. Deleted is a channel I only got into somewhat recently, but I appreciated their video. Corey X Kenshin is the Kendrick Lamar of YouTube. I don't know how much I agree with like that specific comparison, but it was interesting because it's a channel I had never heard of. I don't really watch reaction channels, and particularly not even the genre that they play, but Corey Kenshin also has this manga that's being launched with like this amazing animated trailer for it and the ambition of it eventually becoming an independent animation in the long run. And I am always interested in independent projects. I think Deleted did a great job of like pitching this as something to care about and think is cool, so that was a fun video. Second Wind is mostly a gaming channel. This is what Yahtzee Croshaw writes for now, and there were some good videos on this channel. Overall, the one that intrigued me the most was probably why the Chansey Pokemon card is so expensive, from a show called Good Blood, I guess. I don't even remember watching anything else that was called this, but this was an entertaining one. Lindsay Nicole is a great channel about animal facts. Junkspiracies, T-Rex did not have wings. Just making sure people understand. It's a conspiracy I never would have heard of, but I enjoyed the breakdown of why it's not true. Modern Girls, great channel about just basically all things femme. They have a video called Hello Kitty, the Cult of Kawaii. Jaden Salads is an interesting channel talking about specific aesthetics that have existed, especially like internet-based aesthetics. The forgotten aesthetic Frutiger Metro. I guess Frutiger Arrow has become like a popular resurgence of like an aesthetic from the 2000s that people are interested in now. But Frutiger Metro is like the more graffiti-ish version of it, which I super heavily remember from stuff like the Flowbots album cover. So I was like right on understanding this. To Nari, I don't remember seeing any other videos from this channel, but can we please retire this hairstyle now? It was really good. I think after this video, anything like that uses this hairstyle is just gonna get made fun of. Like, this was like a nail in the coffin for that. Bliss Foster is the most incredible channel I have seen talking about high fashion. Again, a subject I don't really understand, but I like listening to him talk about it. Have millions of Americans bought a fake luxury bag was a very entertaining one. Lextorious is like one of the closest things that exists to what I think Digibro would have been if like I started making videos now instead of back when I did. Like if I was somehow influenced by myself and, but like was 20, this is like the type of channel I would make. The Real History of Rule 34 was a really fun video. Just casual research type videos. I really enjoy that type of stuff. The Blind Mike Project channel. This is a little bit on the sus side of the political spectrum for me as a channel goes, but overall I like the way Blind Mike talks about things, and I like that he's obsessed with comedy history. I remember the Baba Booey, Gary Delabate on the Howard Stern Show, full history being particularly helpful just because, like, that dude's been talked about a lot in podcasts that I listen to, and I never knew fucking anything about him, so it was fun to learn the history and, like, learn more about what made the Howard Stern Show such a unique cultural moment in the 90s. And then Comedy Without Errors, the only channel I've ever seen that has the absolute gall to explain humor and what makes jokes funny or not funny. I really appreciate that someone's willing to do this. And the Shane Gillis video, Delivery is Everything, I think is a particularly good one. Shane Gillis is one of those comedians that I think walks such a fine line in like his cultural pocket that like that is what makes it work, is that like kind of everybody feels like he's on their side, and the only people who really hate that are people who are like, well, that's fake. It's like, well, he's a comedian, they're all fake, but he's doing a really good job of faking in a way that everyone can appreciate. In the category of video game culture, Sparky's World. This is a longtime collaborator of mine who's been trying to sell me on Sonic CD for more than a decade, and so I was very proud to see that he finally got together a 6-hour Sonic CD, The Unsung Masterpiece video that at the very least made me understand why the obsession with this game. K-Bash, a longtime favorite channel of mine because he covers action RPGs, which when I first was going to start making YouTube videos, my intent was to just like cover all action RPGs, and K-Bash has kind of gone with it. In this case, though, the video I want to recommend is about Styx Stealth and the Western B game. This is a game that previously I'd only ever heard talked about by Razorfist, who's kind of unpleasant, so I'm glad that somebody who is very pleasant, like K-Bash, went and talked about this game, because I will probably never play it, but it seems really interesting. Pause and Select, top tier channel talking about anime usually in Japanese culture, but Persona 4 is about television, was a fantastic video on Persona 4 from this year. Gaming Historian, another longtime favorite of mine that goes through gaming history and does like really well researched and well presented documentaries, covered the story of Oregon Trail this year. Manly Reviews did a Dark Souls video called This Game Should Never Have Succeeded that I guess I enjoyed. Albino did a video called Why Demon Souls is Pog. Dark Tark did a video called Bloodborne, but if it had weapons of mass destruction, which is not about Bloodborne, it's actually about Momodora. Vadividya, of course, the Ultimate Souls channel, did the entire story of Armored Core 6, since that's the more recent FromSoft game. The Game LEA, a newer channel, had a video called Void Stranger, the best game you've never heard of, which sold me on this being, one of those legendary games there's no fucking chance I would ever play, because it's like definitively everything I wouldn't like about a game, but would love to hear somebody like, study for me. Video Game Donkey, Animal Well is out. I was just so happy about Donkey doing like probably the best press run of an independently published game ever. Like the most successful launch of an indie publication for a game imaginable. Animal Well is also really good. The Gaming Brit, another channel that I've been following for a really long time, had a video called How Checklists Hurt Games. Annie Austin, who kind of goes through games and studies their landscapes and asks questions about them, did a video, Where Do Skyrim's Rivers Come From? Internet Pit Stop, a top tier channel in terms of doing super long, super in-depth videos about really a lot about aesthetics. Their video about anime background art is legendary, and this year they did one about atmosphere in Pokemon regions that I really enjoyed. Adam Millard, the architect of games, did a video on the forbidden fun of breaking games, which I enjoyed. Patrician TV had the most exciting take I saw on Helldivers 2, Salute for Managed Democracy, which was like my favorite game of the early year. Thor High Heels had a video called Are Games Getting Too Long? I think games have been too long for pretty much since the PS2. It's been too much. I don't need games to be so fucking long. I'm really glad that there is sort of an emergent trend of short games. I finished a video game. It does lots of long form retrospectives. I was glad to see one on Onimusha because that's a game series I grew up with and have never seen people talk about. Action Esports, a great esports following channel, had a great video called Games You Didn't Know Were Actually Esports. Majuler, also another channel with super long-form gaming documentaries, had one on the weird world of Saturn RPGs, which if you like your obscure gaming knowledge, this is like pure nirvana for you. BMask is another one of my favorite channels for a very long time. They didn't have any like mind-blowing videos this year, but The Secret Meaning of Return to Monkey Island was a really solid one. Jeremy Parrish has been steadily chronicling the entire library of certain consoles from the 80s and 90s. Second Coming, the Game Boy Works Volume 2001 is a great video about the creation of the Game Boy. Errant Signal, another of the most influential channels on me. I've been following forever. Again, didn't put out any like substantially mind-blowing videos this year, but Frying Up Some Arctic Eggs was a fun one about a really cool seeming indie game. Tamahiro, the Pokemon expert in my mind, the premier Pokemon fan in my mind for the last decade or so, had a video called I Love 90s 3D Platformers a Normal Amount. Which of course means a lot more than that. GTV Japan, my favorite old head American who's been living in Japan for some time and is always nostalgic about the 80s. The Nintendo Switch of the 90s, the PC Engine GT and Turbo Express, the portable TurboGrafx 16. I hadn't even known there was one of those until I watched this video. Hyperbit Heroes, another channel I've been friends with for a very long time. The Lost Cinematography of Blue Stinger was a really cool video, something that nobody else was ever going to talk about, but it was good. Here's an unexpected one. A Dose of Buckley is a channel that basically just does random cultural analysis, doesn't usually touch on video games, but he talked about Grums, the grifting game dev, a video called Scumbags of the Internet. I was very satisfied by this because Grums is just such an obnoxious cunt and somebody who really needs to be laid into more. I think just the fact that he's not a YouTuber lets him dodge a lot of smoke on YouTube, but like you could have so many videos breaking down like what a dumb piece of shit that guy is. So it was fun to see Buckley just tackle whatever was the latest dumb thing he had said. And last on my list of incredibly lengthy video game documentary channels, Never Knows Best. An in-depth look at romance in video games is especially interesting because it really is that in-depth. Like, really went serious analyzing like how romance has been handled in any game that has attempted to handle romance that had any kind of import on the way it would be done from that point forward. Anime and manga culture. This was a great year for anime YouTube. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Hazel came back, one of my favorite channels, another one that like when I see her videos I think, wow, if I could reboot my career I would do it like this. Weird and kind of scary anime on VHS and some regular and beloved ones too. Basically Hazel just takes you through whatever current like obsession she's got and the journey through that. Like she just has a super cozy atmosphere and all the videos are like a warm embrace for 90 minutes. Miles JK is more of a short-form comedy video. Funny takes, biggest haters anime edition was really entertaining. Kaiser Beams does really excellent historical documentaries on anime. Horus, Prince of the Sun, the film that made anime. Pretty important one to anime history from their Kyoto video series. Kenny Lauderdale is anime's funny boomer old man shaking fist at Cloud and with the lawnmower on the lawn and the white monster or whatever. Golden Bat, Japan's first superhero, was a really cool video that helped me contextualize this character that is pretty important to like super early manga and like cartoons and stuff, but not long after that. Mercury Falcon, also another great channel with long documentaries about anime history, did a video on the birth of Kamen Rider, who is one of the most influential figures in this space still. Nino did not make a full return to analytical videos, but did have some live streams. I was on one of them called Oh You Thought It Was Jokes, Chigaoyo, where we dumped a lot of information about the history of Osamu Tezuka. I did a lot of research on Tezuka this year, but I haven't put out a full video about it yet, so you can hear me in various podcasts talk about what I learned. The Gaming Muse video, Vampire Hunter D, the Japanese horror novels behind a global phenomenon. I've been waiting for somebody to talk about Vampire Hunter D's history and what is the deal with it forever, so this was very gratifying. Pyramid Inu is my favorite newer anime analysis channel that specializes in mecha and also transgender topics. Things like, so what is Turn A saying about identity anyway, was a really great analysis video. Mara did this really long form retrospective on Nekojiru, Social Isolation and Empty Eyes. I have not seen more of their videos, but this one was really interesting. IBI.mp4 had a video called Shonen's Greatest Romance, just basically celebrating the Don manga and the fact that it has such a good anime adaptation. Petrol and Coffee had a really interesting analysis of Jujutsu Kaisen called Jujutsu Kaisen's World is Built on Evil, which helped me in getting deeper into that story, which I grew to really like this year. Drew Malo had another video, Sukuna vs. Mahoraga Blu-ray, basically just talking about what was fixed in that legendary fight and how much better it got in the Blu-ray edition. Steve M is, in my opinion, the best long-form anime analysis documentary channel in that he basically goes after all of the biggest topics. You know, he's tackled like all the 60s movies. He's gone through the whole career of Anno, whole career of Miyazaki, whole career of, right now he's working his way through Mamoru Oshii. He had a video on Evangelion spin-offs this year. If you like anime analysis videos in the style that I do them, there's no reason not to watch everything Steve M has made. Somewhere Past Never is a channel that mostly specializes in loving Yu Yu Hakusho and comparing the manga versus anime, such as in the video Yu Yu Hakusho manga versus anime. Moon Anime, interestingly, this channel was doing more like analysis video type stuff, but I animated a full chapter of this insane manga. Is literally like turning a chapter of Biomega by Tsutomu Nihei into a motion comic, and it's sick. It's really well done. Jax Blade is the ultimate anime fitness channel, basically teaching you how to do the workouts of anime characters. If anime ever inspired you, click this, is a motivational video. Channel 45, The Complex World of Anime Studios. If you want to understand like how anime studios all broke off from one another, this video attempts to break it down in a very basic sense. That one Lucario fan, big time friend of the channel, who helped me to construct a furry anime to watch for Pride Month list, which we've put both on their channel and on the We Watch Anime channel. Hal Cozy had a great video called What is Atashinchi and What is it like in English, about a show that nobody else has ever talked about as far as I know, but it was a really compelling video. Rauro, Making Anime is Her Dream, but it's a nightmare. It's actually like a really good video about animation runner Kuromi. Rising, I think I only saw one video from this channel, but it was how Blue Lock teaches you about the ego you lack, which I had not even like heard of Blue Lock until I watched this, and I was instantly like, oh, I completely understand this, why this is popular. Negative Legend is the prettiest anime YouTuber, without a doubt. I read the Loveless manga, so you don't have to. I really appreciate it because that's one of those that when I was in high school was kind of legendary. I remember seeing the first few episodes of the anime and it kind of just made me feel weird. Like I didn't know how I was supposed to take it. and like who I was supposed to like in the story. And it was nice to have somebody kind of go back and be like, no, this manga is like exactly as uncomfortable and problematic as you think it is. I understand why you want to think it should be good, but this is like a time and place thing that can be left in the past. Lemonade, Neo Tokyo can't handle a real gooner, Akira review. Explanation point, the 1,000-year lolly and philosophical war. I found this one interesting. I know it'll make some people angry, but it starts off with this amazing song. Okay, moving into outsider culture. These are channels that really talk about stuff that's so specific, it's hard to even like describe or tell you like what is this about. You kind of just got to you just got to get into it, you know? There are shows like Who Are These Podcasts and The Creep Off that I've been a fan of. I didn't really keep up with them that much this year. I remember Creep Off episode 200 being good, but I wasn't as into it as I used to be. DFX Studio had a great video, a little mini documentary about the degenerate mind of David Cho. I didn't know too much about David Cho aside from having seen his Thumbs Up series on I think it was Vice, but that was a pretty influential series to like my whole worldview. So it was cool to see something about that guy. Jab 50 Yen, a friend who shows up to every convention, who's involved in the backgrounds of tons of channels, did a rave in the middle of the Texas desert and made a really cool video about it. This looked like such a fun time. I wish I could have been there. Ryan Long, my favorite YouTube comedian. My favorite skit of his this year was probably I Also Talk Blacker around black people like Kamala Harris. He also released a pretty solid comedy special, so check him out. The Clipiverse, friend of the show. I don't know how to describe Live from Dallas Ripiverse meetup other than my friend got arrested live on a YouTube channel and the camera did not stop rolling. So Taperclip, another friend of the show, did a video called Super Killer by Vito Giswaldi, has two big problems. This video won't make any sense if you don't know who Vito is, but it was really funny in context. Biggest problem in the universe, episode number 155, again, incomprehensible without context. Frog Tony, Vito wants young Clippa arrested. This was another whole drama. Sir Sugar Meat had a video called My Favorite Weirdcore Adjacent Art and Media. So if you like, weirdcore stuff, check that out for some recommendations. The Urban Rescue Ranch, Kevin Gets Electrocuted. This is a show where a guy rescues lots of animals in an urban environment and makes chaotic videos about them. Clean Girl, this is another chaotic channel. People really don't like that she cleans graves in a way that is not, I guess, environmentally safe or something. I think the gimmick that she's like basically doing something that's like seemingly like the joke is that she's doing something really bad in a good way or good in a bad way. Like it's meant to make you feel a type of way, and it definitely successfully made me feel a type of way. Noah Caldwell Gervais has long been one of my favorite analysis channels. None of the videos he did about video games were anything that I really cared about this year, but he did a 10th anniversary patron Q&A that I've just found really interesting because I think he's an interesting person who's also been a huge influence on my lifestyle and worldview. Bakaraptor, a friend of mine, longtime anime blogger who did the 9th biennial review every 2 years. He does a review. That means it's been 18 years of biennial reviews. And Glitch Studio, which they do the shows Digital Circus and Murder Drones, and I still haven't finished Murder Drones yet. But Glitch is a really cool studio. I don't love their shows. I think they're really interesting and good, but they're not as aimed at me. They feel like they're for a younger audience. But their video Rising Tides, where they collaborated with Lackadaisy, I was extremely happy about because I love Lackadaisy. I love seeing independent creators collaborate. I love that they're using the fact that they have such a huge platform to do something like that, to link up, kind of pool their resources in a way that benefits everybody. I was just really happy to see it. So that was a great video. All right, the last category of YouTube video that I'm going to talk about, and quite a few of these will make their way into my 25 list. So this is kind of like the all the ones that didn't crack it, because original film and animation, if you did something really that amazing, then probably it's gonna really stand out, So I'll be talking about some of the ones that didn't quite make the list. Phil No Bep. I only just discovered this channel toward the end of the year through this video. Lil Wayne apologizes to Kendrick Lamar. This is the most disrespectful animation I've seen in a while. It reminded me of old school Newgrounds. It was pretty entertaining. Vivzy Pop, I have not been keeping up with Hell of a Boss, or else probably some of it would be in here, but I did watch some of the shorts. Hell of a Short number 3, Mission Wea Boo Boo. That was pretty entertaining. Pig'em Hall, I love this channel. They just make these weird little short aesthetic videos where it's like a cute girl doing a cute thing set to a cute little song. And Pineapple is the one I chose as my recommendation. Louis Zong, similarly an animator and a musician. I would say Louis' music is a lot more inviting, but way less aesthetically specific. Louis just kind of creates videos to specific aesthetics. Sundog Snake Pool is the one I'm recommending here. Titty Tussle was a very fun animation from the CG Bros. It seems to be like a studio that does all kinds of stuff. Brandon Rogers is one of my favorite YouTube channels. This year, he was heavily involved in completing this Class Acts series, which I thought was good, but definitely not my favorite content from him. I really like his totally manic madcap stuff, which not as much of that this year, but still a good show. Deadly Comics put out a bunch of short animations. Easy Bake was really fun. The Collective Animation did Kayla side character jumping, which has just some really cool fight animation. Imagination Rabbit, which is the current name of the channel of M. Strange, always just puts out like the weirdest fucking shit imaginable. Scobbity Time, a Michael Baum film, is obviously just a parody of like the way Zoomers talk or whatever. Into Ekin Zone, Call Me Fighter was good. Rat Boy Genius, I've only recently kind of gotten into this channel. I knew Potato Knishes, and like watching that makes me endlessly happy. Rat Boy Genius's figurine commercial was like astonishingly entertaining for just a figurine commercial. Meat Canyon, I know a lot of people don't like Meat Canyon because he does like very cynical horror videos that are kind of just like pointlessly dark, but YouTube Music Critic was pretty fun, you know, making fun of good old Fantano. And Umami does super aesthetic videos. Sometimes they're just weird, sometimes they're more comedic. What Do You See was a good one. And again, there will be a lot more original film and animation in the actual top 25. So that's all of my honorable mentions categorized. If there's anything I didn't talk about and which you also don't hear me talk about in the list, please recommend it to me. I probably don't know about it if I didn't mention it here. If it's good and I didn't mention it, I probably don't know about it, or I'll really hate it, but we'll find out. All right, let's get to the top 25 now. At number 25, A. Lillian with A Weirdo's Guide to Confidence. A. Lillian is a VTuber who talks about general lifestyle adjustments to make if you want to make things more comfortable for yourself as a neurodivergent person, as somebody who just kind of has trouble fitting in with society in general. This video coming from an autistic, non-binary gamer perspective, but also the perspective of somebody who wants to fit in, who wants to be normal, but not normal in the sense of like, oh, I act the same way everybody else does. Normal in the sense that I feel accepted within the space that I'm in, and people understand me, and people know how to meet my needs, and I know how to meet my own needs. Lillian's really good at explaining tools for helping you to cope with society if you feel dramatically outside of it, and particularly in the same ways that Lillian does. And I think this is one of the best, like, broad general approach videos, like how to change your life in a very general way that is good for getting you deeper into the channel. Lillian also has videos about things like using hearing aids to make a huge difference in your life, which I am seriously considering trying because I've got a similar difficulty making out what people are saying to me, or just like understanding the actual words being spoken. So I think it would probably help me. And I can definitely see other advices Lillian's giving affecting me in the future. So I heavily recommend this channel. At number 24, Professor Sky's record review, Why I Don't Spotify Wrapped. Professor Sky is one of the channels I spent the most time watching, maybe the channel I spent the most time watching this year, specifically because Sky puts out a video almost every single morning, and they're almost always between 30 minutes and an hour long. And they are usually a full review of a hip-hop album that's just come out. Sometimes he talks about other forms of music. There's lots of storytelling involved, lots of personal anecdotes. But Professor Sky is a tremendously interesting person. He is, in fact, an older professor. He's a professor of the French language, but who lives in America and mostly talks about hip-hop. He's lived in various countries around the world. He's studied different art forms and cultures and languages, and he brings all of this perspective into every video he does, and he does a great job of communicating with other creators. I'm going to talk about the Company Man later in this, but the Company Man has really put him on and kind of collaborated with him a lot. So that YouTube friendship, watching that form, has been incredibly satisfying for me this year because, again, both of them put out a lot of content. They are the two channels I've probably spent the most time watching this year. The reason I chose the video Why I Don't Spotify Wrapped is that frankly, most of the specific album reviews, there is something super interesting about them, but they're not all the way memorable, not the whole point of the video, just certain parts of it. With this one, I think most people could relate to the idea of what Spotify Wrapped is, how it affects your tastes, the way that it affects how you engage with music. I will probably abandon Spotify this year, even though I've spent a stupendous amount of time on Spotify in 2024. And I'll talk about that more when I get to my top 50 songs of the year video. But Spotify definitely affected the way I listen to music, both positively and negatively over the course of the year. But in particular, the stuff that Sky says in this video made me re-examine my relationship to Spotify and whether it might be time to try YouTube Music out instead. At number 23, Foreign Fridays, Kai Cenat, a Negrospective. I hope I'm allowed to even say that video title. This is a channel I literally just discovered last week through this video, so I can't say that I know the channel extremely well, but I subscribed very quickly based on just the strength of the writing, the extremely bubbly persona of the host, the comedy, the subject matter, and what really clinched this video for me was the perspective and what he was focusing on to critique Kai Cenat about. Because personally, I would not have any reason to engage with Kai Cenat. I know he's the biggest streamer, but it's incredibly childish content that he does. So to me, it's kind of obvious. Critiquing it would be way too obvious. It's just not for me. It's not aimed at adults. But what he's critiquing is Kai Cenat's transphobia, homophobia, just generally bad vibes that he's putting out, and being somebody who's influencing children, what that could be, how that can be damaging to people like me in particular as a trans woman. So that's why I was so appreciative of this. Again, I've kind of touched on this throughout the honorable mention section of this video, but I really appreciate that we are entering an era where creators can call each other out and point out if somebody's doing something reprehensible, that we need to make sure that they correct course, because it's not that we're trying to get these people to disappear or die or whatever. It's just you need to change the way you do it. Number 22, Pillar of Garbage, That Time Ghibli Made Over the Hedge 10 Years Early. This is an analysis of Pom Poko, which is the most underrated Ghibli film in my opinion. I think it's a phenomenal movie, but it's also difficult to understand, especially from a Western perspective, because it is so couched in Japanese history and Japanese mythology, and it's very metaphorical, and it's really deep. And this video, while it's not a super in-depth analysis of the film, it does touch on all of the central themes really well, and it provides this really surprisingly interesting comparison to the Western animated film Over the Hedge, which I've never seen and is probably not considered a masterpiece, the way Pom Poko is. This video doesn't think so either, but it is a really it was unexpected to me how much similarity there was between the movies as drawn out through this video, which I assume they mostly made because they had just done an analysis of Over the Hedge, and so it was kind of like, okay, branching from that, here's another movie that tackled a lot of the same things and did it better, and here's what could have been, so to speak. And that was a really interesting perspective to have on this film that I don't know how you would get people to watch a video about otherwise. Like, it's funny to think that Over the Hedge, a relatively obscure animated film, was still, like, enough popular that it would be a good... Like, it belongs in the title over Pom Poko, which is, like, one of the films from Studio Ghibli. But it's, like, their least popular film, So I understand why the title is the way it is. But, yeah, it's a great video. It's one of the only videos about Pom Poko that's out there, so check that out. Number 21, Vic and Hope, the reappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. Obvious disclosure, Vic is literally my younger brother, Hope is his wife. They talk about me in this video, but that's not why it's up here. It's actually because this video made me reappreciate Haruhi Suzumiya and, like, understand it through a different lens, which is interesting because, like, I loved this show in high school, and so did Vic and Hope. So they have a kind of endearment towards it. Like, they revisited it with the mentality of, like, this is something we liked and we're gonna figure out, like, why we liked it. I most recently revisited it watching it with my husband Bird, who has no experience with it previously and had no real reason to think he would like it. I didn't really think he would either. Like, it's not his type of show at all. Watching it with him, it really sank in, like, how hateable Haruhi is as a character, how hateable kind of all of them are. And so I felt sour on the show because I felt like I couldn't enjoy it in the way that I had once, or that, like, it just didn't hit the same. And then Vic and Hope, with their analysis, they kind of opened up for me, like, the meta of the themes behind the scenes of the story. That, like, maybe the point isn't necessarily that the characters are likable, but, like, that the story has something to say about their issues, about what makes them not the best people, and they are young. There is some forgiveness there. It was an interesting perspective, and they even used me as, like, an example in trying to explain the show. So maybe that did help it hit with me even more, but it was just, like, it really changed my view of the show to be like, okay, I think I see what it's doing, like, over the course of its whole arc. I think I see how this is a good character arc in a way that makes it a thoughtful show, a show that has meaning and has something to say, even if it's not always an enjoyable experience for me. So that was a cool podcast. And Vic and Hope seem to be back in the swing of things because they've already put out 2 lengthy videos this year talking about the third Sonic film and also about a Cartoon Network show that they're hoping doesn't get canceled, but I've already forgotten the name of it. Perfect Fight Lady or something like that. All right, at number 20, Trenton Art with Shonen Jump's rival manga magazines. Trenton Art is an incredibly precious channel. I love this channel. I love that someone with the perspective Trenton has, which is not straight, taking that perspective and being, like, the biggest Shonen Jump fan of all time and going through the whole history of the magazine, literally year by year, analyzing everything that is available at all. And, breaking down the whole history of the magazine, all of its trends, all with, like, this endless enthusiasm. None of it's about, like, taking anything down or calling it trash or whatever. Like, there are some trash manga that have run and Jump, but, like, this channel is mostly dedicated to just celebrating Shonen Jump and its whole history and its legacy and everything that makes it great. And as somebody who grew up with Shonen Jump, even if it was just the American monthly version of it, this is, like, something I've always wanted and that nobody's ever been able to provide to me in English. And so this is, like, a great service in my mind. But particularly the one about the rival manga magazines is even more special because so much focus is placed on Jump and almost nobody talks about the other magazines. And so getting something historical, really going in on those, was really nice as well. Number 19, Resonant Arc with the Planescape Torment analysis series. When it comes to video game analysis, I think Resonant Arc literally blows everything else on YouTube out of the water. Part of that is because it's not scripted. Part of that is because it is a conversation between two people with Both really interesting but very different perspectives. They're both incredibly analytically minded people, but one of them comes in with the mentality of like a critic, and the other one comes in with the mentality of like a cultural anthropologist. And the two of them discuss pretty much only games that are known for having great story. If the game has a story that people can't stop talking about over time, they're going to go incredibly in depth and break it down. And they get opportunities to talk with developers sometimes, to talk to people who are like experts on the series, really just go deep into the bones of it, researching the symbolism, everything that these games have to say. So pretty much any series they've done on a game is one of the best analysis of that game out there. And this is another case I mentioned in the honorable mentions section that K-Bash does like every action RPG exactly in a way that I had imagined when I first got into YouTube. And like 4 or 5 years ago, I also had planned a series where I was just going to try to determine what video game has the best story. My approach was too in-depth. It ended up being, I wrote like an hour and a half about the first level of Mass Effect, and I wrote like 10 pages about the first hour of Ogre Battle, and it was just too exhaustive. Like, breaking down every single technicality of what the story is doing, it doesn't really prove how good it is. It proves like how much it is, or how much good there is. Like what they talk about with this series, they're kind of cutting through all that bullshit. They're allowed to go very particular. They're allowed to fixate on just one detail if that detail brings out, part of the conversation. But the point of the series is not to exhaustively review everything that happens in the game. It's to go through it bit by bit and figure out what is it trying to say, how is it saying it, and why do we care? Why can't we shut up about this game? Like there's kind of an assumption walking in that the game is legendarily good. It must be. Or else why would we be talking about it? Planescape Torment in particular, I chose this series because it is legendary almost exclusively for having like one of the most philosophical storylines in video games, and for having one of the most complex systems of choice, where there's just so many different possibilities that exist in the game space based on what decisions you make. And it is a game that is incredibly foreboding. It's something that, like, stylistically, it's not something I would ever want to play. And this video series kind of relinquished me from feeling that I would need to, in a way. Not to say that I think I got the experience of the game or anything like that, but that I had been trying to understand why, like, what is this game saying? Why is it so popular for a long time? And it's just so complicated that trying to make like an analysis video, anybody else would have sat down and written like 8 hours, and it would have been just horribly boring. And listening to these guys talk about it and try to figure it out together was exciting, and it was kinetic. It felt like a gaming experience in and of itself. It wasn't playing the video game, but it was watching these guys play the meta game of figuring out the video game together. And I think that's really good. I love their show. Highly recommend it. At number 18, Greg Glinstone, The Lost Art of Video Game Critique. This is a very new channel, and I don't think I've seen any other videos from them, but it's like 2.5 hours long, and I already mentioned about Foreign Fridays. I love the trend now of creators critiquing other creators, particularly critics, because critics can have such a tremendous impact on a game's reputation or any piece of media's reputation that when their stance is the only thing anyone hears and it resonates with a lot of people, it will become that is just how a thing is culturally remembered. And I both appreciate that but consider it a shame, because I've always wanted there to be a parallel contrasting voice. Anytime people tell me like, oh, well, you didn't cover my perspective in your video, I'm like, I would like you to make a video. And the reality is not a lot of people knew how to do that 10 years ago. But more and more, it's becoming easier. There's so much more guidance. There's so much more of an idea, and like just less of a pressure that it's like something you have to do as a career, and more of like people just kind of make videos for this, because they want to talk about a thing sometimes. So with this video, it was a critique of a critique but one that was basically breaking down a type of media analysis that has become popular and what is wrong with it. When I was in the early days of trying to make analysis popular on YouTube, like, I was so fixated on let's not be doing quality judgments, but just like breaking down what literally is in the thing. But oftentimes there came some level of quality judgment with that, right? Like, I would say, here's what it's doing and here's why it's good or here's why it's bad. And that's just my opinion, but people would take that as me being objective. And there became this popularity of like objective analysis where people are trying to figure out objectively, point by point, like second for second, if a game is good or bad. You know, like, well, this mechanic was good and this mechanic was bad. I'm going to break down why, and here's, you know, and it's just such a disconnected way of looking at art from like the real experience of it. I can be accused of this in plenty of my own writing. I've got tons of little segments of my videos, especially the really long ones, where I'm like, I didn't need to go in that hard on like this or that detail. I was just always trying to like really exhaustively make my point. But now we've gotten to where the average video is hours and hours long, and people are just being as exhaustive as they possibly can, and it's unnecessary. So this video does a great job of breaking down the whole problem with like the Jason Alexander method of game criticism, the attempts to be objective, all the weird rules that people start creating when they attempt to be objective, and how those rules don't make sense under scrutiny. If you want to understand how to like be a good critic and not in the long run like build like a hate base against you, like people who really hate you because they hate that you keep insisting you're correct with your takes but then having takes they disagree with, this is a great video to help you avoid that. All right, number 17, Super Eyepatch Wolf, How Jake Paul Beat Mike Tyson. I wasn't sure if Eyepatch Wolf would make the list this year because a lot of what he was doing was just like recaps of, you know, whatever he thought was cool that season. But this was a big one. The Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight was a huge cultural moment, I think. And it was really interesting to watch unfold on social media. I ended up paying attention to it because I, throughout my whole life, have heard of Mike Tyson as like the most vicious guy. And Jake Paul, as I understood it, his boxing history was basically a joke. And in this video, Eyepatch Wolf explains what that joke is. Exactly how is he telling that joke? Exactly how is that joke getting pulled off? Why is Mike Tyson just the same joke as all the others? You know, like, why did this make just as much sense? Every single victory Jake Paul has had makes perfect sense, including Mike Tyson, and he breaks all of that down. He's not the only one who said anything in this video, really, but he got all of it together in one place. It's comprehensive. It's incredibly well made, as all of his videos are. So, like, you know, even if it was a little later than some of the other coverage, I think this is kind of like the ultimate breakdown of the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson situation. If you wanted to understand this cultural moment, this is the video to come to. And number 16, Acculturation's video on cultural cringe. Acculturation is one of my favorite newer, younger YouTubers that makes really interesting videos, often going through a whole subgenre of metal or alternative rock music and breaking down its influences, its history, what defines it specifically, how you tell it apart from other categories, with this incredible sense of patience and like a very comforting tone. Because a lot of like rock and metal history has felt the need to be like, oh, well, the music's edgy, so I'm going to be edgy in the way I talk about it. And, you know, there's always been all this attitude and pretentiousness in the way that people talk about these genres. Acculturation really strips all of that away, comes at it very matter-of-factly, very deadpan, but with like a lot of passion and sincere love for the subjects being talked about. And aside from the videos about like genres and stuff, they also will make videos that are breaking down cultural ideas. There was a super interesting series where they compared each of the last 6 decades of American culture to the 6 stages of grief, and like saying that we're going into the acceptance stage, I think, in the next one, or maybe we're in it in this one. I don't remember where it ended. It sounds like it shouldn't work as an idea, but it's just so well done. And it's amazing how much perspective this person has, despite being quite young, into like what these decades were like, and like having lived through some of them, I felt like, yeah, okay, this checks out to me as somebody who lived through this. All that was interesting, but I chose the On Cultural Cringe video because Acculturation, talked about cringe a lot, and like a lot of the bands that they talk about are cringe, but like in a way that is entertaining and is part of the point. So this is a great video about embracing cringe, about understanding cringe, about like what makes you cringe on a cultural level, and like how that can be a positive or a negative thing. It's just a super interesting video. I definitely recommend this channel. They're pretty small and new. If you haven't heard of them, give them a sub, especially if you like alternative rock and metal music. At number 15, Todd in the Shadows with Train Records, Justin Timberlake's Man in the Woods. Todd in the Shadows is probably in my top 5 favorite YouTubers of all time. I think he is like maybe the most consistently good YouTuber. Almost everything he uploads is great. It comes out on a pretty regular schedule. The series he has are just some of the best ideas for a series. He has the One Hit Wonderland series, where it's always about some kind of super memorable one-hit wonder song and the whole history of how it came to be and what could have been for the artist and what actually was for the artist. He does pop song reviews, and then, of course, Train Records, the series about albums that basically fucked up a artist's career. And this one's on Justin Timberlake's Man in the Woods, which I had already heard him talk about the singles from this, and review them when they came out and make fun of them then. But it's even funnier going back in retrospective, looking at the whole rollout, just how much of a mess it really was. Again, there's like an element of nostalgia here almost, because Todd's been doing this for so long, so consistently. And I just think every year his writing gets better, audio gets better, his, editing gets better. So it's like you're getting the same thing, just always with improvements. I think he's like the platonic ideal of a YouTuber. Like he's what everyone wishes every YouTuber was. Just like every video's a hit. It's always a good time. Making fun of Justin Timberlake's hilarious. I can't stop thinking about get your filthy hands all over me, or whatever the fuck he says. Put your filthy hands over. Because I want to think get your filthy hands up off of me. That's what obviously you should be saying. Yeah, anyway. Go watch that video. It's very funny. At number 14, I'm Just Saying, unpacking every poop bar on Ice Spice's Y2K album. I rediscovered I'm Just Saying this year. I remember him from the old Assassin's Creed parodies way back in the day, which I still quote constantly. And this video is pure comedy. Most people heard Ice Spice say, you think you the shit, you ain't even the fart, and they just like completely walled out her new album, just ignored it. I'm very glad somebody saw the comedy potential in dissecting it and really went in. This video was hilarious. This is probably the video that made me laugh the hardest, like that I remember laughing at the most this year. I remember losing my shit. So I'm really glad that I'm Just Saying still making funny videos on YouTube. Still making me laugh like 12, 13 years later. At number 13, Oki's Weird Stories, the family that had 2 armed standoffs with the government and won. Oki straight up makes the best documentaries on YouTube. The most thorough, most researched, they are just legitimate documentaries, but on YouTube, like made independently. Purely on like the strength of his grit, just like his will to go out and do it as like a thing to do. Obviously there's money involved, but he's not like being handed in advance and a crew. He kind of like goes out with a couple people and meets people like the Bundy family and gets like really close with them and figures out the whole story and presents them in a way where he's very real about it. And that's not flattering, but it's also not like he's going out of his way to be unflattering per se. It's more like in his honesty, he's very demystifying, which is kind of the opposite of what most like TV documentaries try to do. And that it makes everyone else feel like way worse. Like it makes all other documentaries look harder to trust, because most documentaries feel like they are trying to emotionally manipulate you into thinking that the reality is more dramatic than it is. And Oki is almost always trying to reveal like how much sillier and dumber like the reality of the situation is. You know, how much of it is just misunderstandings and folly and like talking past each other and just like people having a weird outlook on life and not being willing to face that fact. Yeah, I think that all of his documentaries are fascinating. He is pretty much never talking about anything anyone else is talking about, so you'll always get a very unique experience from his channel. Highly recommend this one. Number 12, Ye-Man, interviewing Jujutsu Kaisen animator on Mappa Meltdown. This is probably the most important anime video on YouTube this year. Ye-Man's coverage is generally fine. When they go into like interviewing people and stuff is when I really respect this channel. This is amazing journalism. This is like the most open we've been able to get into like what it's like to be working on an anime production in, 2024. And honestly, this disillusioned me so much towards like wanting anime to like even exist, because I look at it as it's just an exploitation industry. If you can be independent, it's worth working as an animator. If you can't do it at a level where you can do it as an independent job, your labor is going to be exploited so hard that you're going to lose a lot more than you think, because you can't really understand like what the future ramifications are of like putting yourself through this industry at a young age. And it chews through young people. It chews them up and spits them back out into regular employment. It's a brutal industry. The animator being interviewed is obviously incredibly talented and will be able to survive this industry on the strength of that talent, but also is basically coming at it from the perspective of like, I get to talk about this because I'm successful, but like I'm in the rare boat here, like I'm one of the exceptions to how bad these circumstances really are. And I don't know, it's disheartening for sure, especially considering how good Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 is. Number 11, Zevi, Andrew Jackson, When a Psychopath Became President. If I could put together a Mount Rushmore of 2024 YouTubers, the 4 people who just constantly put out gold all year, and I was like always watching them, Professor Sky would be on there, and Zevi as well, and then 2 others that we'll get to momentarily. But Zevi, just every single video is a banger, nothing skippable on the channel, and it might even be my favorite YouTube channel, like just of all time, because basically Zevi just tells very casual but super dense, super densely written and very beautifully written videos for ADHD people explaining history, and a lot of it modern history. But like typically what he'll do is break down a specific problem that someone had and how that situation played out, whether they solved the problem, whether it persists as a problem, whether that problem killed them, like he always talks about a problem that somebody had and he tells the story of that problem. And usually it's famous people, whether it's because they're celebrities or because they're criminals or because they are politicians or anything like that. He basically is constantly telling you like black pilling stories, stories that remind you that the world is a weird place and that the rules that you think it operates by don't really apply. Like, they are there to keep people thinking that they're supposed to do a certain thing, but people who just don't follow those rules make the world an incredibly strange place, and plenty of them get away with it all the time. His stories about Shia LaBeouf and Kanye West are always incredibly interesting because those guys are just like running around doing that shit. The videos about the Young Thug trial were super interesting. Probably the most succinct breakdown you're going to get of that whole situation, because a lot of these stories, like, they are so big and so out of control that it's hard to summarize it into like a small digestible thing. Zevi is masterful at it, and his timing is perfect. He always waits till exactly enough information is out that he can tell the story without having to leave anything out and have like, have to redo it later. He'll update, like he'll talk about the next stage of a story, like pursuing it, but it never feels like you're left on a cliffhanger. He always tells a complete thing. Lots of shorts. The videos are exactly as long as the story, requires them to be. And I chose the Andrew Jackson one because I've watched it a few times. What fascinated me the most about it is that Andrew Jackson is like the worst president, and he's done so many horrible things. But what Zevi chose to fixate on was just a story of an interaction he had with one guy where like he had dissed this dude's dad, and the dude got pissed at him, and they kept like challenging each other to duels and like, threatening each other. And finally, when they had the duel, he like basically shot twice and just like killed the guy because he just did not want him to walk away. It just dead ass got away with it, and like that to me, I think of all the stories about like people just kind of doing whatever they want and getting away with it, that's the most like, yeah, a guy just straight up in front of everyone killed a guy in cold blood, broke the rules of the game, and there was just kind of nothing anybody could do about it contextually. So, some people just get to do whatever they want, and Zevi will keep reminding you that. I love the channel. At number 10, JReg with Hobo Tier List. JReg is another very precious YouTuber. Everything he puts out is killer. I haven't seen as much of his content as I'm sure a lot of you probably have. There was a period in like 2018 to 2021 or so where I was really heavily going into pop psychology as a part of my channel. And it's still obviously a background aspect because like I'm fixated on psychology as a personal fascination. I was really leaning in on like the meme of it, of like audaciously talking about things that I couldn't possibly fully understand, but like that there's like a culturally relevant discussion around, like autism or schizophrenia, like these kind of broadly understood cultural ideas, but I was trying to explain like new angles on them, and JReg really has done a way better job of that than I ever did. Like the same kind of thing that I was trying to do, he figured out how to be exactly the right amount of ironic, that it's obvious that he's doing a bit, but also obvious that he's being serious. In my case, people can never tell. With him, it's overwhelming how much irony there is and how much that irony circles back around on itself. And to me, I think if you were going to introduce yourself to JReg, Hobo Tier List is a great video to do it. It's one of my favorites. I've watched it a bunch of times, in part because JReg is maybe the YouTuber I relate to the most in terms of like the kind of shit I think about and how I think about it. Homeless people, for instance, there was kind of like a joke around me for the last few years that I was homeless. And it was mostly because Bird and I were traveling so much and also camping so much that I took lots of like outdoor photos and didn't really have like a clear place of residence. So people were like, you must be homeless. And a part of me kind of like wants to be, and kind of always has wanted to. Like when I was in my teens, I thought about like running away a lot. I thought a lot about being homeless, but I didn't know how. Like I didn't know how to do it. And I do know how now. Like I've read a lot of accounts of it. I've done a lot of cold camping, like I've spent a lot of time outside. So to me, like when I look at homeless people, I'm always fascinated by the particularity of what type of homelessness they're experiencing. And most people just kind of categorically think of all hobos as the same, like they're homeless, whatever. JReg breaks down like 50 different specific type of homeless people, all of whom I have like seen and understand what he means. Like every single one of them, I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah, all of those, yeah. And the chart is he's going through and saying would or wouldn't. And obviously would in this cultural climate means sleep with. But in the end, he switches it up and tells you what he really means. I don't know, I guess the implications aren't like necessarily super different, but like the whole idea of it is that there's like 30% of types of hobos that JReg's like, that's basically just me, like the only difference is that I have chosen to maintain a house over my head. But like, it's very easy for me to imagine becoming one of these types of hobos, not these other ones, but like there's at least like out of the Venn diagram of hobos, there are some that I would be. Yeah, I was very entertained by this video. I love J-Reg, love all this stuff. I hope he keeps doing it. And number 9, we watch anime. Perfect. Yeah, that's right. I put my own fucking video in the top 10. You know why? Because I'm one of the best fucking YouTubers on the platform. And I, frankly, haven't been getting enough respect this year. People have been sleeping on my content. My We Watch Anime channel has been the most active it ever has been this year. I wrote all these videos that are super accessible, that were all made specifically to be something that any anime fan could click on and be entertained and have some thoughts about it, and nobody watched the goddamn videos. Nobody shared the goddamn videos, and the few of them that finally started getting successful, like my Dandadan video, got a copyright strike. My Animate Associatives video has done pretty well, 20,000 views. I'm happy about that, and that was a really good video, but it's nowhere near as good as my Perfect Blue analysis, which only has like 7,000 views. I know it's 80 minutes long. I know it's about a movie from the 90s, but it's a movie that runs in theaters regularly. I know you fucking heard of Perfect Blue. I know most of you have fucking seen Perfect Blue. You know what you haven't seen? An analysis of Perfect Blue this fucking good. It's as long as the movie. I made it exactly as long as the movie. I put so much fucking thought and effort into this video. This is my best video. This is unquestionably the best video I have ever put onto YouTube, and it has 1/1000th of the views of my most popular video. Please, please watch Perfect. It's my best video. It's about one of the best anime films ever made. If you care about anime and anime analysis, you should have seen Perfect Blue, and you should have seen my video. God damn it. Okay, number 8, Speedoru, Punch Punch Forever, My Little Slasher. We're finally getting into the independent animations that I promised would be all over this list, but really they're all packed up at the top because they're just so good. Punch Punch Forever, a very obviously Trigger influence, very Kill la Kill feeling, but like much more madcap, Adult Swim type humor. It's wild, it's wacky, it's sexy, it's funny, it's cute. I've got a t-shirt from this show. Done something a little bit different with each episode. It's memorable, it's cool. It's just a good time. If you like anime, I can't understand why you wouldn't like Punch Punch Forever, unless you just like boring anime, I guess. All right, number 7, The Company Man, my response to What's the Dirt. The third face on my Mount Rushmore of 2024 YouTube, and the one who's been there the longest. The Company Man has been one of my favorite YouTube channels for a very long time, as I mentioned when I talked about Read My Soul's dedication to him in the honorable mentions section. The Company Man has been a hip-hop journalist for seemingly forever, as long as I've been into hip-hop. He's always been somebody who's on the ground, getting the interviews, working for various publications, basically running the media department at various publications. He had this incredible series called The Breakdown. He used to go on Rude Jude's show and post the clips of that. He made me a fan of Rude Jude through that. He's just done so much cool shit for YouTube over the years, but he was always very sporadic, very like in and out. After leaving Hip Hop DX, where he had been doing the Breakdown show, his legendary Greatest of All Time series, like basically the conversation we have now, when we talk about what can make a rapper the greatest of all time, he set those standards. Like when we talk about that stuff on YouTube, everyone on YouTube who cares about the conversation of greatest rapper, we've all seen those videos, and that is how we decide. Like he basically made up the rules. And now he's opened up the conversation to more people. His Culture United podcast is the best YouTube podcast I've ever heard. It's every other week he gathers together all of the best hip hop critics that are on the platform, you know, in the wake of this whole Drake Kendrick beef. All these people started creating on here, and they just have conversations about what's happening in the culture, and all of them are incredibly thoughtful, incredibly mature. You know, he's got the best taste for people, I think. So I've just incredibly enjoyed everything he's done this year. But most of the time, the Company Man videos are very momentary. They're like about what's happening now. I think the Culture United podcasts stand up, and as a series, I highly recommend watch. There's like 4 of them out. I would recommend watching all of them. But if you just wanted one video, one like knock you out, this is the one, this is the video that's gonna make you understand this guy. This fucking What's the Dirt video. You ever seen a YouTuber get their like lights punched out? I mean, basically this was the Kendrick Lamar diss track of YouTube. Like it was pretty much like watching a microcosm of the Drake and Kendrick beef, where one guy said some weird shit, the other guy said, hey, you're saying some weird shit, and he said some more weird shit in response, and then just got packed out, and it was unbelievable. It's one of the most scathing, hard-hitting, beautifully written beatdowns I've ever heard in scripted YouTube form. And again, I've said this several times about this video, I really want more criticism of critics. I want more people calling out when someone's analysis is wrong, when someone is saying some shit that, you know, that doesn't belong in the conversation. And, you know, I've updated my opinions over the years so many times based on comments, you know, based on people telling me like, hey, you can't be saying that, or hey, you understood this wrong. You know, just on my fucking most recent Nosferatu review, I pinned a comment pointing out that I fucking thought the girl's dad was in the movie and the character's not even her dad. And that's like a pretty big thing to get mistaken, but I'm not the best at hearing. Analysis, I think, stands up pretty well, but it was funny to get something so like wrong. But you know, I'm gonna stand up and admit that like right away. Oh shit, I'm an idiot. You know, I'm not gonna stand there and be like, well, you are a nerd for even caring. And that's basically how What's the Dirt approached this. Yeah, it was deeply satisfying. I've never really seen such a vicious battle between critics, and I guess it's only really possible in the rap sphere where like rap battling is a part of the culture, but I really want to see that. I want Kendrick and Drake's battle to influence things outside of rap. I want to see critic battles on the level of rap battles in 2025. At number 6, Lackadaisy Stratagem. 2024 was the year I really picked up my furry card and held it to the sky, and Lackadaisy played a big role in that. It's this cute, adorable, awesome, fun, gangster 1920s prohibition cat story about cat people who are gangsters. It's like very much in the vein of like a Bacano vibe, but instead of being like really edgy and violent, it's like cute and kind of sing-songy. Just really well written above everything else. Like what really draws me to it is that aside from having a cool aesthetic and a cool vibe and all the videos are really well directed, the comic looks incredible, it's really just the writing is so damn good. We had a like 1 minute short called Stratagem that is one of my favorites to come out of the series so far. It's just 2 of the characters playing a game of chess and having an argument that turns out to be fake and part of this gig they're doing. But the pacing of it, the tone is just incredibly well done. Mordecai is just such an adorable character in general. I love him. I really want the plushie. I couldn't decide which one I wanted, if I wanted the small one, the big one, or both. So I haven't bought one yet, but I do have a Jack's Burger from Glitch and a Stolas cat from Hell of a Boss, so it's only a matter of time before I collect me a Mordecai. At number 5, David Leo, 7G, The Fight Against Phones. This is essentially postmodern deconstructionist nonsense from an extremely Zoomer, like borderline Gen Alpha lens, like a young group of friends making a home movie, but just going all the way with it. Total full send. Everyone's got awesome outfits, just cool effects, weird dialogue. The aesthetics are super schizophrenic. Everyone's playing with gender in interesting ways. There's lots of just like sly social comments. I wouldn't even call it commentary, just comments. It's a film that it pretty much exists just on vibe, and that's seems to be mostly the case for David Leo's work so far. And I love the vibe. It just felt so much like this is how I wish my teen years had been spent. You know, there was definitely like a vicarious aspect to it because I used to make skit comedy like YouTube videos that were just kind of nonsense ADHD stuff springing out of my head, but never had the visual capacity that these videos have. Like, these are not just like fun ideas, but they're just so like captivatingly realized. Even though it's like obviously shot in a bedroom on no budget, it still feels like you're entering a world and entering this unique group of friends and this unique perspective that's obviously like very guided by this director persona who's, you know, kind of putting their friends into this situation of like, okay, you're going to be actors in this thing that I've constructed, this world I've built. It feels like I'm right there in the creator's brain when I'm watching it. And I appreciate that because their brain is shaped enough like mine for me to understand what they're saying, but also not so much that I really like get it, you know? It's like, it's not like looking in a mirror. It's like having a really interesting conversation with somebody that I'm happy to realize exists out there. Number 4, Local Script Man, writing with the Enneagram series. I could have just picked one video because Full Meta Jackman was really, really good. It's an analysis of the Deadpool vs. Wolverine movie. I really liked that movie. I really liked that video, and that video explains why I really liked that movie really well. But I had never even heard of the Enneagram. It's, I guess, this writing utensil / psychological profiling thing that I find tremendously more interesting than like MBTI, because while I do think MBTI is somewhat interesting, it's so complicated and it doesn't have like a clear application for me as a writer in the same way that this Enneagram thing is like built around identifying archetypes by way of their conflicts, by way of their fears, their emotional dealings, you know, and how they face those circumstances. It's super interesting because each one of these archetypes, like I know somebody in real life who fits the archetype perfectly if I were to write them as a character. So it's very helpful in sort of bridging the gap between real people and how you would sort of reduce them to an archetype for use in a story. I actually haven't gotten around to watching the last 2 parts because they came out like right at the end of the year, but the whole series is out covering all 9 Enneagram types. He actually did them in reverse order. And yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that you just watch this and you'll immediately become a better writer. Local Script Man is obviously a very good writer. He is a script doctor, so like it's hard to think that there would be somebody with a more helpful opinion on writing. So I'm very glad that this channel exists, and I recommend you check it out. All right, number 3, Takena with Midnight Vampire. Once again, independent animation, entirely coasting on the sickest of vibes. Takena does Eroguro scat nonsense, absolute nonsense clay art in a vibe that feels like Robot Chicken gone moe. Like if like all the characters had Corpse Bride's face and like video game archetype personalities and Robot Chicken scenarios. But Midnight Vampire is like just sort of a short gothic action horror piece about like a badass undead chick who saves an alive chick from like a serial killer. It's purely just fun. It's like if you can take one look at this and like I literally saw the thumbnail and I was overcome with a desire to see the film. That doesn't happen to me a lot. It's pretty hard to engage me just on the basis of, oh my god, that looks awesome. This was an absolute case of instant, oh my god, that looks awesome, I have to see that. And I just watched it. I'd never heard of the channel. I was completely enraptured. I watched it start to finish with like doubts the whole time of like, what is this? Is this going anywhere interesting? But like the whole time, I just stayed engaged and I loved it. So definite recommendation for me. All right, now it's time to get to the big 2. These are 2 videos. The top 2, either of these could have been number 1. I sorted them the way I did because the one I picked for number one has way fewer views, and I want to promote it even further. But number two is FD Signifier, I'm What the Culture Feelin'. This was the definitive Kendrick versus Drake beef breakdown. If you're wondering why there weren't like 200 other videos about this in this list, it's because they became unnecessary after this one. And to be fair, this was like the last one. This was after the dust had settled. Like everyone else had already said their piece. There'd been tons and tons of analysis. FD went and said, I'm going to tell you the whole story from the very beginning to the very end without skipping any details. And by the end of this, you are going to completely understand this thing. I also got a shout out in this video, and a lot of people let me know about it. It spiked the views on my own Kendrick versus Drake video by like 6K. So big thank you for that. I had not seen FD Signifier before at this point. Like, I'd heard the name. I didn't know what kind of content he did. So, you know, when people started telling me that I was talked about in this video and then I see it's 3 hours long, I'm like, oh boy, I had to like set aside, you know, a weekend, like a space in a weekend where I was going to sit and watch this whole thing, and I was completely blown away by it. Actually, I should mention, before I even watched it, because people told me about it, like, I wanted to know who he was first. So I went and watched a bunch of Signified B-sides of his side channel, which I really like because it's the more casual and topic broad channel. You know, he's not only talking about like really serious social stuff on that channel, it's more fun. So, you know, I kind of got to know him through those videos, and then finally watched I'm What the Culture Feelin', and that was incredible. It was, you know, again, it's the best video out of like hundreds that all covered this thing, and it kind of like shut everybody up for a while. Like, until something new happened, this was like everybody kind of understood this is the video. You know, this is the only one that really needs to exist going forward. You know, I left in my honorable mentions some that were about more specific stuff, like the pop-out show analysis, but like, you know, you don't got to go back and watch anybody else's video beside this one if you really want to understand what happened. And FD Signifier has become one of my favorite YouTubers since then. He is the fourth face that would be on my 2024 YouTuber Mount Rushmore. Just people who everything they put out all year was fire. He was on, you know, several of the Culture United podcasts with the Company Man and Professor Sky. You know, so that's three of the faces from my Mount Rushmore on that podcast. I don't know if Zevi would have any reason to be there, but, you know, he's the fourth face. I almost forget about him when I think about it because he's so, you know, not related to the other three. But like the four of them are my four favorite of the year for sure. All right, but the number one, my favorite YouTube video of the year. This should be predictable if you've heard me talk about my favorite videos this year. But number one is Zangief's Horny. I actually did a whole breakdown and analysis of what makes this so great for That One Lucario Fans podcast, where they had a bunch of us from my Discord server come in and talk about our favorite anime of the year, and I talked about this in the context of it being my favorite anime of the year, but that hasn't come out yet, so I'll give the short version here, and you can check that out if you want the long version, but you just need to watch Horny. It's incredibly good. It's a gay, furry rom-com in a way. It's a music video of a sort, like an old school Tom and Jerry cartoon about a guy just getting really horny in the mall because he's feeling lonely and he's surrounded by hot guys, and the feeling becomes overwhelming until a point where he receives non-sexual physical contact that ends up being calming and sort of puts the nerves at bay. But the whole thing is just, it's storyboarded brilliantly, it's timed brilliantly, the character designs are so good, everything Zangief has released looks incredible. Love the art style, love the message, love the feels of it. It's kind of lived in my head since watching. I think I've seen it twice, and I can like picture the whole thing. Yeah, I really appreciated this. It spoke to me on a soul level. That's why I had to put it at number one, because even though FD Signifier's video is like literally god tier, I can see watching Horny like an infinite number of times through the future, showing it to an infinite number of people. So that's why I had to put it at number one. But again, either one of them could have been the number one. of the year, please watch at least all of these 25. If you don't watch the 150 other recommendations, at least watch the ones I talked about in this list, because they're all very much worth your time. And that's it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this list video and that you will come back for the next one, because I have to do my top 50 favorite songs of 2024. Hopefully it won't take a 2-hour recording. I don't know how long this video actually is to get through all of that. You can find all of my links in the link tree. Please send me money. I love your money. Your money makes me happy. Your comments also make me happy. Your love makes me happy, but your money makes me happier. All right, I've been Trixie the Golden Witch. Later.